Let's jump right in.
All right.
Aras, thank you so much for joining us. I figure if you want to, we've got an hour blocked, well, 50 minutes now. If you want to spend the first 20 minutes or so just walking through your story, even start from the MBA onward. I'm sure some people would love to hear a little bit, a minute or two about Survivor too, but all the pieces that brought you to where you're at as CEO and co-founder of Christy, your focus on sustainability and especially, the regenerative or regeneration that you've been talking about a lot in the last year or so.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, I'll dive in. So I went to UC Irvine. I was on scholarship to play basketball, but I redshirted my freshman year. So that meant, sorry, the music. Valeria, can you ask them to turn the music down a little bit? Thanks. Sorry, I'm at the factory right now. I'll give you guys, we have like our offices upstairs, but then down below is where all the dresses are sewn. And then there's more team here. It's lunch break, but get an idea of where I am. Sorry. And they bump the music during the lunch break. So, but yeah, so having graduated with a bunch of AP credits and knowing I was going to be in college for 5 years, I was like, oh, I'll just graduate early and I'll do the 3-2 program and go to business school. And it worked out. I managed to do it. And they really didn't want to let me into business school because they were like, you're too young. I wish they would have listened to themselves. They should not have let me in. But no, so when I got done playing basketball, I went to overseas to go play professionally. And that lasted for about 3 weeks when I finished up with school. And I came back home and I was just like, being young and having kind of climbed the ladder, as it were, so quickly, and like going to school for an MBA at 22. I just wanted a break. I was just like, I'm done. And so I started studying yoga, and I moved to South Africa. But however, when I was in business school, we had this class, and it was like, take a small business and rebrand it. My father had lost his shirt exporting things from the US to Lithuania after the Soviet Union collapsed. And the only thing that kept him afloat was this tiny little hat company that he had, where he was importing Russian winter hats into the country. And so when I was in business school, can you guys still hear me? I must have frozen. Did I freeze?
Yeah, a little bit. It might have been me.
Okay, so no, it's probably me. So, anyways, we did a project last company. Like he was bringing in Russian winter hats, and they were just literally from the old Soviet Union, and like dark gray, like gray, ugly. I mean, they're ugly hats unless you're in cold weather. I was born and raised in Southern California. I personally hated the hats. 75,000 of those hats arrived in my backyard when I was 13, so I was just hitting puberty. And I already had this Lithuanian name, and now we had Russian winter hats in our backyard, and I was mortified. Get to business school, and it's like, all right, how can you rebrand this company? And the idea that I had was like, what if you offer them in different colors and you put NFL logos on them? People in stadiums want to be warm, watching. Great. Submitted the project. We did really well in our little group. And I didn't think about it again. Now I was in South Africa studying yoga, and I kept having these dreams of like billboards of this company. So I came back home and I was like, Dad, I'm going to help you with your company. And he was like, you can't help me with my company. He was like, but if you want, start your own. My grandfather had left me $5,000 upon passing. So I took $5,000, naively thinking it would be enough to start a new company. And I started a company. And while, like, 10 days into that starting of the new company, a friend was like, hey, I just got asked to be on Survivor. And I was like, well, are you going to do it? And he was like, no, I'm too skinny. That friend actually sits in the corner and works with me and ended up winning the Amazing Race. However, that's not what we're here to talk about. I said, well, I'll do it. Like I just come back from like Mount Madonna in Santa Cruz, where I was studying with Baba Hari Das, living in a tent for 30 days. I was like, I'll go do Survivor. And so I went on and I won. And now I had a war chest of $1 million to fund my little seedling of a company. But what happens when you're 24 and you have $1 million, you don't come from money, is you certainly don't want to sit in an office all day getting told, no, this crazy idea is not going to work. Every time I'd hit a dead end, I'd leave the country, go hike Machu Picchu, go down to Ecuador. I was really not in it for the long haul. And then I was, because I was broke. Within 5 years, I was in $50,000 in debt, and I had this company that I hadn't figured out how to get off the ground. So I'd obviously learned a lot of things in those 5 years. And I managed to sell the company just to get myself out of debt. But I learned a lot. And a couple things that I learned. One is that starting a company is really challenging. It's hard to do it by yourself. And if you don't believe in the product, it's even harder. I never believed in those hats. I'm from sunny Southern California. I have shame around those hats. Why was I spending my whole life energy selling hats I didn't believe in? Come to find out, the idea wasn't a bad idea, because now all these big hat manufacturers sell those hats in those colors with NFL logos. Probably if I would have buckled down and done the work early on, it may have been successful, but that wasn't my journey. I had other lessons to learn. But I did learn like what worked and what didn't work as it related to DTC at that time. My wife was modeling. She was my girlfriend at the time. I wasn't even able to make rent. And she was like making up for my side of the rent. I was looking for jobs. I remember I went to an ad agency and they were hiring for a social media manager. This is like 8 years ago now. And they offered me $35,000. And I was just like, what? I mean, that's crazy to me. I told them, I was like, first of all, you guys are looking down the wrong end of a really powerful weapon. If you're only thinking you're going to spend $35,000 for a social media manager, this is the most powerful technology, available, and it's going to change the way we market. But they didn't listen to me, and I was only asking for $70,000. Can you imagine that? I had an MBA and all I wanted was $70,000 so I could pay my rent. But they didn't hire me, thank God. And so my wife came home from modeling one day and said, I want to start my own dress company. And I said, let's do it. Let's do it as a hobby. Because I knew that the pressure of financial stress is really hard when you start a business. And so if you're needing it to pay the rent, that's going to be a hard thing. And after I sold my business, I had enough to make the rent. Like, I wasn't stressing about money. I certainly wasn't not stressed about money, but I wasn't like, I didn't need the business that we were going to start to pay the rent right away. And so we had no idea how to start a dress company. I had a hat company where we had things made overseas, but how are we going to start a dress company? So what I did is I asked all my friends who had fashion companies, and I had enough. And I said, if you were going to start today, what would you do differently? And all of them said, well, I certainly wouldn't do fashion shows. I certainly wouldn't wholesale. I would sell direct online. I said, okay, that's good information. And then I watched the way my wife used Instagram, and it was way different than I was using Instagram. And I saw that she was like really looking at Instagram for inspiration, for style. And so we came up with a strategy. And I said, look, we're not going to spend $1 on the advertising. All of our money that we spend on marketing will go into really good content, beautiful imagery. And our friends who have a lot of social capital, we'll gift them dresses. We'll take pictures of them. And this is before the word influencer came out, right? This is our strategy. But how are we going to make these dresses? I knew we had to make them in LA. I believed in the dresses because every time I'd go anywhere with my wife, they'd always ask about the dresses she was wearing, even the ones she didn't design. So I knew she had a great aesthetic. But the other thing that I had learned about having hats made overseas is I had no relationship to the means of production, and that didn't work for me. So my core value was like I had to have a relationship to how these things were being made. So we decided LA made the most sense, but we had no money to start this company. We started with $20,000, more than the $5,000 I started my other company with. And so we couldn't go to a fabric mill and just say, hey, we're going to order, 1,500 yards, which is the typical minimum from a fabric mill. We just didn't have the capital to do it. And so we had to look at other places to source the fabric. And dead stock made the most choice. Dead stock fabric is the excess fabric of other fashion brands. So this t-shirt that I'm wearing is made by Madewell. Let's just say the consumption on this t-shirt is 1 yard on a t-shirt. Let's say they decide they're going to make 10,000 t-shirts. They don't order 10,000 yards of fabric. They order 12,000 yards of fabric because there's going to be some damages. Something's going to happen with some part of the fabric. And usually there's an excess of fabric at the end of the season. If they're not going to use it, it's not part of their calendar. It's not part of their schedule. And so they either dump it in a landfill, they hold on to it for a little while, then they dump it in a landfill. But then there are these jobbers that come by and say, hey, if you're going to throw it away, we'll give you 50 cents on the dollar or 10 cents on the. They aggregate that they sell it to like fabric shops, like your local fabric shop or whatever. But typically brands don't use dead stock because it's not scalable. But we weren't thinking about scaling yet. We just wanted to launch. So we decided on dead stock. And in that decision-making process, we also went into inquiry, like we didn't know anything about the textile industry, but like, why is there all this excess fabric? And what we quickly learned is that the textile industry is the second largest polluter on the planet, the fashion industry in general. And so just like any good marketer, we told the story of dead stock being a better choice than conventionally grown, conventionally produced textiles. So we started, it was a tiny collection. Christy designed 5 dresses. Each style averaged 10 units. So we had 50 dresses when we launched, but we told the story of dead stock and the designs were really beautiful and we sold out right away. And people's feedback was not only are these dresses beautiful, but I love the idea that I can buy a dress and feel good about it. And so for me, I guess I should have started back when I was 7, because when I was 7, I was part of the Save the Bologna Wetlands campaign, or 10, I don't know how old I was. I was an idealistic little boy. Like I believe I would flush my dad's cigarettes down the toilet and get in trouble because I wanted to save his lungs, you know? But by the time I became an adult, all that idealism was paved over by the Playa Vista development. And for those of you who've never been to LA, that's what they built over the Bologna Wetlands. And now all of a sudden I'd started this company not really having many expectations, and I was getting this water on that seed somehow of like, wait a second, you could do something that's good for you and good for the planet, or at least not bad for the planet. And so we followed the thread, right? And for 5 years, we built our company only using dead stock. There were challenges because you can't scale with dead stock, right? Like the most you're going to find, if you're lucky, is 500 yards, but that's like a rarity. Most of the time it's between 20 and 100 yards. That's like max you're making 20, 30 dresses. So to increase sales, that means you have to increase SKUs, which means you've got more people taking photographs. It just becomes more costly. But we did it. We scaled to the point where we were able to take on an investor. Buy our own house. We're like, amazing, we can buy our own house. This is amazing. And in that moment, I had been grinding for 5 years, like day and night, working on it. I was doing everything. Half the time I was designing the dresses. I was the one that was closest to the business. I could see what could sell, what didn't sell. We ended up opening our own factory, and we made sure that we paid people correctly. Everything was done under the perspective of take care of the ones that take care of you, and the world will last forever. And that was kind of the philosophy. But it was an evolving philosophy. It didn't start that way. It evolved. We were informed by our community as much as we informed the business, right? And so when we took on investors, I was able to take a little step back. Probably shouldn't have taken that step back from like a linear line of thinking, because there's been a lot of consequences to that. Because it's not like I hired a CEO, but I just needed a mental break. And I'll share this with you guys, and you can take it for what it's worth, but I'll share it anyways. Is I started studying with a teacher down in Colombia who carries a medicine. It's known, to all of us it's ayahuasca, but in this culture it's called yahe. And I started drinking this medicine, and it started to show me how the water felt, and how the soil felt, and how the air felt. And I had these terrible, terrible nights. It was the worst night of my life, where I felt into what we're doing to the planet. And after I purged and released that, it then showed me my family on a farm. And I studied with this teacher I still am, but for 4 years I was studying with him. And every time I'd go back to the medicine, it kept showing my family on a farm. And I kept asking the medicine, like, how do I reconcile having a consumer-facing business when consumerism is the problem? It's the overconsumption, it's the lack of relationships, it's the lack of intimacy. And the medicine kept telling me, no, you fool. Yes, it's a business, but you have the opportunity to be a vehicle for transformation. And it kept showing the family on a farm. And then one day I came into that ceremony, and in the morning I got it. I was like, oh my goodness. Instead of just thinking about being sustainable, what if we thought about being regenerative? What if we grew our own cotton regeneratively? And we actually not only benefited because we can now scale, because we've grown our own cotton so we can print the way we need it to print, but now the earth is healing. And I remember I came back to the office on Monday a little disheveled, because these ceremonies are not fun. But sorry, the lunch bell. Lunch is over. I came back to the factory and I told the team, like, hey, we're going to regenerative. We're gonna call it farm to closet. It's like, how the fuck are you gonna do that? Like, we buy dead stock from an aggregator. You're gonna go lease land somewhere and grow cotton. But I had the vision for it, and I was like, we're gonna do it. So a bunch of synchronicities happened to allow for that. And I have this working theory that you take one step towards aligning with nature, and nature will take 10 steps to align back with you, because you are nature, and she's so happy that you remember that. And all of these incredible kind of synchronicities allowed for, in a very short period of time, we found somebody who wanted to start their own organic cotton farm, but wanted a brand to pay for it. And we convinced them to do it regeneratively. And we started with 4 acres of land, very depleted acres of land. And we paid the lease for the land. We paid the farmer salaries. We paid for all the processes. We even paid for the sugar that went into the farmer's tea. Most brands pay for yield, if they're paying for yield at all. Most brands pay for yield, if they're paying for yield at all, right? Most of them aren't even paying for yield. They're going through 18 middlemen, and then they're just paying for fabric. And so what you have is a supply chain that's intentionally bleached of any human relationship, period, human and non-human. So that when I go buy that cotton, like conventionally grown cotton for $1.50 a yard, I don't have to know about the land that I extracted from, or depleted the soil from, or the humans that I exploited to get it, and I can sleep at night, right? And so to me, the answer was, we have to get more into it. We have to rebuild these relationships, both human and non-human. And so instead of paying for yield, which is basically saying, like, farmer, you deal with all the consequences of human life on this planet as it relates to our ecosystems. You take all the risks. And if you grow it successfully, we'll buy it from you. We said, no, you don't have to shoulder that pain. We'll take the risk. We will pay for all the processes. And the idea being, like, one person holding all the weight, that's a really intense pain point. But if we have 2, it becomes less intense. If we have 3, if we have 4, if we have 100, we can all shoulder that, and we can all help transmute it. So it was a risk, right? We're a small brand. And, we didn't know what we would get. If there was a flood, a drought, a blight, that meant we would show up with nothing. I got investors that I have to report to. We still haven't figured out profitability with investors, because we haven't figured out how to scale. We're burning cash, and all of a sudden I'm telling my investors, hey, we're going to go lease land in India, and we're going to do this regenerative thing. And thank goodness we have amazing investors who believe in us, because they're like, all right, go for it. And it worked. The crazy part is it worked. So when I went to go visit the farm when the plants were very small, I came back right at the end as we were harvesting. I asked Kupasamy, who was the matriarch on the land. She doesn't own the land, but she's been living on it for 50 years with her husband. So Eshwari is the matriarch, Kupasamy is the patriarch. Sorry, that's her husband. I asked Eshwari, I said, tell me about this process. Tell me what it was like. And we spent 7 days having tea and having lunches every day and going out and working on the land. And she said, well, first of all, she said, I don't have sores on my arms and my legs anymore from walking through these fields. She said, also, she's like, I've never in 50 years met the people that are buying the food or fiber that we are growing. And now that I know you guys, I'm going to put much more energy into these plants. And she goes, and as far as the earth, you don't have to ask if the earth is happy. Just look, the dragonflies have returned, the earthworms have returned. And it gave me goosebumps. It was like I was reading a script of a movie that I would want her to say, right? It was really cool. And like, for me, that was enough, because I'm more anecdotal person anyways. Like I don't rely too much on numbers, another flaw of mine. But we did get the numbers back. We got the soil report back after we harvested. We sequestered 66 tons of carbon from that harvest. That includes the second harvest, which was 20 acres, because COVID happened and we just doubled down on it. So in 24 acres of harvest, we sequestered 66 tons of carbon. We got enough dresses to make 6,500 dresses, enough fabric to make 6,500 dresses, and truly like do something at scale. And it's not without its challenges. The cost of regenerative cotton is 30% more than the cost of organic cotton, right? That delta is starting to come closer, because they're starting to kind of clean up what is organic cotton and what isn't. There's a lot more organic cotton available every year than there are organic acres of cotton to grow, and doesn't add up. Either way, there's, our customers are sensitive to price. So a 30% increase in the price has an impact. And so we're still figuring that out. But I wish I could sit here in front of you guys and be like, we figured it out. Like, we've figured it all out and it works. It does work, at least with the earth. The earth has profited from it, and the farmers have profited from it, and at a lot of levels, I've personally profited from it. We are still trying to figure out how to get people to really understand the what we're doing. I think most people don't even get it. Like people don't even know what regenerative means. And so it's hard for people who aren't paying attention, who are on their phones all day long, eating shitty food and don't care about the earth, to then all of a sudden be like, but it's organic, it's regenerative. It doesn't, but we are continuing with it. We have 45 acres we're harvesting now. And yeah, that's the story of Christy Dawn as it stands today. We're opening a store on Abbot Kinney in Venice on Wednesday. So if my energy seems scattered, it's just because I'm birthing something else right now. And yeah, do you guys have any questions?
Awesome. Aras, thank you so much. And yeah, to JP's point, a few of us do know what regenerative means, but it is slowly but surely becoming a word joining our lexicon. Ranjini, you have a question?
I do. Thank you so much for being here, Aras. This is really, really interesting. So in our marketing class right now, we've been talking about pricing, and I was just curious if you could talk a little bit more about your pricing strategy. One of the things that we learned was you sort of have to figure it out early on because it's really hard to change once you put your stake in the ground. And then as a follow-up, I wasn't familiar with your brand, so I went and checked out your website. The price points are higher than maybe some other comparative brands. So I'm just curious, like how you thought about positioning and what you think about affordability for people who want to be able to support, but it might be harder at this price point to be able to buy more sustainable clothing.
Yeah, those are great questions. So starting with price point, when we started the company, very small, we were just like, we'll do 3 times whatever the cost is, right? So if it costs $30 to make a dress, then we'll charge $90 for it. And that's how we started. But remember, we're having things made in LA and at our factory, everyone gets paid a real wage. They get paid vacations, they get medical benefits. And so the cost for us to make a dress, the average cost just in labor on a dress is $60, right? Compare that in LA with other cut and sews, it might be $50 more. But that actually is the cost of taking care of each other. And then also the other side of that, the other reason for that is that our stitch per inch count is 14 stitches per inch. The average is around 10. So right there, that's 40% more time it takes for every seam, right? So like you're paying more for hours and now it's taking more hours. And then we just value construction and our people don't zoom through. Like if I move the screen and you watch, you'd see like very methodical, conscientious approach to how we make our clothing. And so, the price of the dress is really just a 3 times markup. That's what it is all the way around. Now, I wish what I would have done at the start is worked backwards, because I didn't realize that a 3 times markup makes it really hard to be profitable. And I'll explain why, right? So let's just say we sell a dress for $300, okay? The cost of the dress is $100. You have a return rate in our industry between 20 and 30% on any given day. That's what happens in fashion because women's bodies have many curves. It's not as simple as just men's t-shirt. So let's just be conservative and say it's a 20% return rate. So that's $60. Well, we can add 20 back to the cost of the goods. So fine, we'll call it 40, right? But then we have kind of discount codes that fly around the internet. So the average discount on a dress is 15%. So that's $45 more, right? Then you have your credit card processing fees, you have your shipping, which we offer free shipping at a certain threshold. But even if it's not free, we supplement. So we charge $6 even though it costs more, right? So after all that, you've got approximately $200 of costs. So your contribution is $100 before marketing, right? And now if you look at your what it costs to bring in a customer, the average cost per acquisition is $100. And I still haven't paid my team, right? So, and that's obviously in a growth model. That's We are growing, but there's not a lot of profitability there. I just sat down yesterday with like the head of marketing for Aloe Yoga, and she told me their margin goal is 75% wholesale. So just to put that in perspective, I'm not a great mathematician, but that's like $30, $35 on a $300 dress. That's the cost, right? So that's a $70 difference from where we are. And yeah, Christina, oh, you want to see the factory, Christina? You guys want me to turn it and see? Okay, you can kind of see here through the, can you guys see where everyone's working down there? And these people, everybody that works here, like we all know each other quite well, you know, like the dressmakers, like to my right here is Dom, and she's in charge of the website, but it's a family here. But these are the things that I'm learning about, like, wow, that was really noble to be like, yeah, let's just do a 3 times markup. But the financial realities of it are, unless we get to scale. So our investors like, no, don't worry about it. Just grow. And eventually you'll sell enough dresses that, because obviously the lifetime value of the customer is more than one dress. And so eventually it pays itself off. Now, the other question that you brought up is like affordability. And I think that's a bigger conversation that is less about our business and it's not our responsibility. Is the reality is that it's not affordable is because we've extracted and exploited people so much that we've just gotten so used to paying shit for things, and we get paid shit. And so we can only afford shit. And then it becomes this like downward spiral. So I don't take it on myself to say it's my responsibility to change the whole world and provide affordable things for everybody. I would love to, that sounds great. But the way you provide affordable things for people is you pay people the right amount. You pay them the way that they afford things. And then, you know, the energy keeps moving. And if I'm just trying to do a race to the bottom to compete with people who have an expectation, like, for example, I won't name any names because they're all here around me listening, but one of our employees walked in the other day with a dress. I knew it wasn't a Christy Dawn dress because I know all of our fabric, but I was like, it could be a Christy Dawn dress. Was it our competitor? Was it Doan? Was it Reformation? Who was it? She's like, no, it's Old Navy, $30 dress, right? We're never going to compete with that. That means $30 dress. That means that they're paying what? $3 to have that dress made, right? Like, that's crazy. Like, we are killing the earth. We don't have much time left. You know, JP, your son's playing or daughter's playing that piano for not very much longer if we keep doing those things, you know? And so it's a really good question because we get it a lot. Like, hey, these are, you know, out of the price range for a lot of people. It's a good question because, you know, it is out of the price range for a lot of people, but it's not like I can go and be like, all right, we're going to solve this by addressing price point first. No, we can't. The only way we begin is, like, in my opinion, I should have started with this. My theory, my overarching theory is that we have economic symptoms, environmental symptoms, social symptoms, but at the core, we have intimacy issues. That's what our issue is. We don't know who we are. We forgot who we are. We think somehow nature's separate from us, right? We don't know how to be with ourselves. We don't know how to be with each other. We don't know how to be with the earth. And so then the answer then is intimacy. And so how do we do that as a company? How do I do it? Well, I went to India, right? And I was like, yo, I want to treat the earth. I'm going to ask the earth what she needs. I'm going to ask my seamstresses, what do they need? Because those are the people I'm working with. Those are the beings I'm working with. Unfortunately, like, I can't ask everybody, but within my circle, that's what I can control, right? So now I'm at this interesting place where we are as a company, where the rubber meets the road, right? And we have to figure out, how do we get to profitability? Because if we don't, then we're just another example of someone who had good intentions, but it doesn't work, and it will only justify more extraction because it doesn't work. We have to figure out how it does work. And so, you know, one of the strategies we have is like, yes, it does cost more to grow cotton regeneratively, but we can also have those dresses made in India, where the standard of living, the cost for a good life is a lot less. So you can pay people better there, and it's still less than here. Doesn't mean this factory ever closes. It just means that our growth comes from those places, and we can still be in our integrity and pay people well relative to that standard of living. But a dress might cost $10 to make there in terms of the actual labor. The fabric's not going to change. We're never going to sacrifice that. And those people working there feel like they feel like they're being treated well, right? And that's one way to bridge the gap. another idea is like, don't have such an aggressive ROAS, right? Like don't have such an aggressive CAC, but then you don't grow. And if you don't grow, then how can we, there's a lot of things at play. And I don't have any answers. I wish I had answers for you guys, but I'm just sharing with you, like giving you like insight into this process. And it's been painful at times for me. I can speak to it like in my body where I'm like, how do I make this work? And then it just requires like a deep faith in nature and just one foot in front of the other, and we'll figure it out. And if we don't, it's not like we haven't been here before. We'll do it again.
Christina.
Yeah, thanks, Connor, and thanks for setting this up. I think this has been almost mind-blowing in many ways. You're very well spoken, Aras, and your experience just speaks on so many levels, I'm sure to all of us. I'm wondering, I mean, what you're touching upon literally is the catch-22 for me of the fashion industry. How do you continue to grow a business that at its very core is consumptive, right? And in current shape, detrimental. And how do you continue to grow your profits while convincing people that it's actually better to buy less and to wear the clothes they have more, right? And that's, I think, the only other company I've seen really pushing that is Patagonia, where they're basically, their ad was, don't buy this jacket.
Right.
Reuse it, get it from a secondhand store or give it to a friend. And you don't, I mean, that's highly unusual, right? We're not told that by anybody else in the clothing industry. So I think what you're doing is both laudable but necessary. And there's a whole consumer mindset that needs, a shift in mindset that I think really needs to happen for us to address the massive amounts of waste and pollution and all these other issues that you're touching on. It's not even just the direct impacts of pollution. It's the land use, the social welfare, social standards of living, and everything that goes into it. And I think that's so massive, and it's an opportunity at the same time as well as a challenge. But to get down to my point was, we have a Center for Responsible Business at Berkeley, and we've been setting up these bi-monthly sessions with the director of the center, who's also professor at Haas. And he has a whole thing on sustainable business case studies. And so another person in our cohort and I read or listened to about 15 different case studies on sustainable businesses. And yours is by far, like, your story is the best one, I will say, of the 15 that I listened to. And, they run the gamut, but there were a few clothing businesses in there. Nothing is coming close to what you're talking about. Nobody's talking about regenerative agriculture. Nobody in there they were talking a little bit about wages, proper wages and social welfare and things. But I feel like if we could write a case study on your company, or if somebody could write a case study for operations, you just went into all of that, where you're sourcing, overage and underage and the costs associated with that, your strategy, like how do you market this? How do you get people to see, like, do you put it on the price tag, how much it costs to produce this and where the wages are going and all of that? I just feel like you have so many lessons to teach other people and not just us. I mean, this is a very small glimpse of our whole class that I feel like you could be reaching a much bigger audience if we did something like that.
Yeah, that would be
Just
really
my proposal.
cool. Yeah, I would love, look, also just in any good case study, there's a lot of problems in the business and then the students figure out the solutions. So I would love that also. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's an interesting ride, that's for sure. And it's like, I guess the two things we have two small children, so I always kind of frame things now through like, what am I leaving them? If I just leave them a pile of gold, but there's dirty water and no fresh air, like, it's not going to help, right? And then I think it's also like, the reason that I shared with you guys at the beginning that we didn't start out with the intention to change anything in our industry is because, as you guys set off on the places that you guys go, one of the things that I think is really important to know is that the journey itself will shape you. You don't have to have all the answers at the start. We didn't when we started, and we still don't we haven't figured it out, but I have this faith that like, hey, start and be the proof and learn as you go. And the fact that you guys are even on this call and listening to these case studies is like, just don't feel the pressure that you have to have it all figured out. And it's been my own personal, like this business is more powerful than any ayahuasca journey that I've ever had. It has brought more tears, more screams, more pain, you know, and all I can do is just be with it and breathe with it and get humble and recognize I don't have all the answers. And right now that's kind of where we are. We're in this edit. We're kind of in that part of the story where we're cleaning the shit from the stalls. I believe that's Hercules, right? That myth, right? We're just like figuring it out. And so I think like if we can approach just business in that way at a personal level, that it's this journey of growth. And if we stay open, like I the person that I was when we started Christy was not going to sit here and tell you any of this or have any of this relationship to earth. I didn't have it. I didn't, you know, and hopefully in 5 years, that's why I said that jokingly, Connor, about recording. And hopefully I look back and I'm like, oh, in 5 years, hopefully I'm a more evolved, you know, soul and understand more. And I think that's the beauty of it, you know, of the whole thing. But thank you for sharing your thoughts, Christina. And I'd happy to let you guys have full access to the ups and downs and challenges of our company if you want to do a case study.
Amazing. Christina, that's a great idea. Aras, thank you. I actually had a question. Are you still doing a lot of dead stock dresses, or is it mostly moving towards this regenerative farming in India?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we still do dead stock. Like last month, we released approximately 220 units of dead stock. And then we sold about 5,000 dresses last month. So most of that was from farm to closet. We now do organic cotton that is dyed with organic dyes, and that's our bridge, because there's no like the long-term vision. When I'm done, hopefully it's soon. When I'm done with Christy Dawn is the day that we are able to say every single fiber that we use comes from a direct relationship with either the land, with the farmer, or the rancher. And I think we can do that. But to do that, to really fund it, we need to find financial success. We will be able to scale into it. It will happen. We need systems that are more efficient. We need to make sure that we have all those things in place. And one of the bridges that we're using for that is organic cotton. It's obviously not regenerative. I would argue that's probably not really sustainable, knowing what I know about organics in those games, but it's as good as anyone else is offering, right? And so knowing like, and again, this is kind of where that catch-22 comes in, right? Like the vision is to build to that place where we can really be supportive, but we have to recognize like what do we have in our bag right now of tools, and how do we get there? And so, yeah, I would say like 5% of our offering right now is dead stock. Not 5% of SKUs, because it's probably more SKUs of dead stock, but the actual depth, you know, we release something in dead stock and we're lucky if there's 20 of them. That being said, like our largest release of any dress this summer was only like 200 units. So we're still a relatively small company. We're on track for around $10 million this year in sales.
And one more question. So I think someone touched on it in one of the questions earlier, a little bit about fast fashion, and you know, that's how we've been trained to live, right, and consume our fashion. How has that been especially from a marketing standpoint? How has that been trying to overcome that hurdle, trying to convince people that, you know, you buy once, you wear it for 5 years? You know, I know sometimes for guys, it's a lot easier. You buy a suit and maybe you get it tailored once every 5 years and it lasts 20. But, you know, especially in women's fashion, you know, most of the big fashion houses, it's, you know, 4 to 6 releases a year. And you know, they just stopped burning it recently, you know, some of the big houses.
Right.
So
right.
How has that been, trying to change that mindset, especially as a small player in such a vast marketplace?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's a great question. So first I'll share with you. So our friend who is a landscaper, we do trade. So he does landscaping on our hill, and we trade for dresses. And his wife came over one day, and she said, when I first started getting these Christy Dawn dresses, it was amazing because I started to ask where everything else came from that I was wearing or buying. I was like, oh, that's great. That's kind of what we hoped for. And she goes, and now I got to be honest with you. I'm getting to the point where I'm like, I don't even need another dress. And I'm like, yes, that is eventually the end point. You don't need another dress. And it's diabolic, but there's enough people out there that are so unconscious that like, if we could think of ourselves as like, it depends. The way I look at it is there's so many people. If we could just get them into our ecosystem that are still in the buy because I want to be cool thing, that hopefully by the time we get them, we get them in, and then they start to shift, and eventually they get there. And there's so many more people. It's not like there's like a lack of unconscious consumption happening. I will also share this thought, because I was reading an article the other day about AI and machine learning, and how like some of these fashion houses and fast fashion companies are able to spot a trend before you or I would even know it was a trend. And they have this like, on-demand production now, where they can produce it and get it into stores almost as fast as we can, because we have this factory right here. And so play it out, right? Like eventually the trend will play itself out. Like trends in general will play it. You just can't keep up. It will be impossible for us as humans to keep up. The trend will be a day long, and you don't have the budget for it, and there's no way, right? And so then what's the next move, right? Then why are you actually buying these things? And that really opens that opens up to that deeper story. That's where I really do believe that people more and more will start saying like, well, why am I buying this, right? And if we can say to them, yeah, you're not buying this because it's a trend. You're buying this because it's going to be something that you wear for a long time, and maybe you give it to your children or your children's children. Also, for us, our most successful dress styles are still the styles that Christy designed first. Our best-selling dresses are Dawn dress, and internally as a team, she's an Aquarius. A little bit about my wife, the Aquarius, is she always wants to feel unique. Everyone's catching up on Christy's trend, that I really feel like she was like kind of one of the first cottagecore designers, and it kills her, right? And so she wants to design something different, and I'm like, you don't have to. But everybody, like, Old Navy's now selling our dress, right? That's something where I'm like, hey, like, let's actually just go back to the basics, really rely on the basics. And that's another part for the business, right? Like successful businesses, talk to a restaurateur, you talk to someone like the head of Allah. I'm like, there's probably one product, I told her last night, that just like, that does it. She said, yep, it's our leggings, right? You talk to a restaurant, they'll tell you like, there's one dish that's where they kill it. Sometimes we've made it more hard on ourselves than we need to, because Christy's always kind of trying to create the next kind of iteration of a dress to keep herself interested. And lately I'm just like, babe, the Dawn dress, like you don't need to design a dress for 5 years. You have 500 dress styles that you've designed, but it's still our best dress is that. So it's like, these are the places for me where I'm also a Libra. Sorry that we're getting into astrology. I know you didn't expect that. Like we're both like visionaries and like ideas and those kinds of people. And what we absolutely need is like this like grounded, rooted schedule structure. There is value in convention. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and you got to use the Death Star against itself. You can't just not be there at all. So anyways, does that answer your question? I don't know.
Definitely. Does anyone else have any questions? Got about 5 minutes left.
Well, I don't have any specific question, but Aras, I just want to applaud what you're doing. I totally believe in your ethos. I did a permaculture design course about 10 years ago, 2 weeks of learning all about, regenerative agriculture and regenerative human culture. And, I'm so on board with the mission. And it's really the reason that I am in business school is I'm looking ahead, I think, to a similar journey of trying to assemble all this knowledge and all this networking and all the resources, right, that we get in business school to try to crack this equation of like, how do we make something truly sustainable without it needing constant influx of outside funding, right? Like that's also a sustainability piece. Is it that the business itself is essentially has to be regenerative in its own incarnation, right? So that's, you know, that's my quest too. And I'm hoping that, you know, my time here at Haas will give me enough of a toolbox that I can at least like get on that road and get through that process of like, you know, learning and being taught right by the mission itself over time, to keep scaffolding my way towards that vision. So yeah, more power to you, man. I really respect everything that you're doing.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
I have one last question. It's a little bit more personal. How is it starting and running a company with your wife?
Oh man, that's a really good question. The hardest part was during, you know, being an entrepreneur, like having your own business, like the workday doesn't really stop at all. But then when your office is in your house, it's really hard. We just moved back to the factory last week, and that has been great. Like I said to her when we got home the other day, I was like, oh my God, it's so nice to just be home with you. But it's not without its challenges. I think it's really hard because I'm the CEO and she's the design director, and typically a CEO would get to say what they needed to say to the design director, and there wouldn't be pushback in that way. I mean, hopefully there's some creative pushback, but there's not like, fuck you, I'm not listening to you, you can't tell me what to do, which happens sometimes. And maybe, you know, it's hard because there is, in corporate structures, there are power dynamics, right? There has to be. And in a marriage, ideally, you don't want that. You want there to be open communication and what works for you, and this doesn't work for me, but this works for me. But in the company, like we're both beholden to what the company needs, right? And I happen to just have my ear a little closer to the ground of what the company needs because that's my job. And then when I communicate that to her, sometimes she's like, don't tell me what to do. And then I'm like, I don't know what to do here. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's too much information.
That's great. Thank you.
That could have been way worse, by the way. Thanks.
There's
for your
definitely days
honesty.
that I come home from the factory. Like she leaves a little earlier than I do. And like, there's, you know, one of like my friends who works here, employees on family area. Like Christy hates me today. I'll say that sometimes. I can tell she hates me. But then we live in Santa Monica and we work downtown. So this is not very environmentally friendly of us, but we never drive to work together. It's kind of our sacred time for ourselves, like where we need the space so that by the time we do get home, we've had a little time to air it out.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much. This was awesome.
Yeah,
Very
thanks
enlightening.
guys. It was good to meet you all. And if you guys are ever down in LA, I'll throw my email in the chat. If you guys ever want to come see the factory, feel free. Good to meet you guys.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care.
Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you.
Good luck with the rest of the course. And yeah, many blessings to you guys.
All right.